May I have your attention, please? I'm son of Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins. I would like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. Now it's time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. Shalom, everyone. My name is Sonny Yisrayl, Benjamin Alexander Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. I now would like to introduce the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now entering the sanctuary. And now I'd like to turn it over to the queens of the House of Yahweh.
Obedience is the key for people like you and me. You see the benefits when you listen to your authority. So practice self-control. It's the only way to go. Consistently work hard at it, and you will learn and grow. Respect should always be given. To love and obey, I am willing to accept the things
Shabbat Shalom once again. At this time, we'll turn the services over to the great son of Israel, Abel, Deacon Yaakov Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, there was a sign. I don't know how many people saw it, but you would have seen it as soon as you came onto the 44 acres of the House of Yahweh, what we call the feast grounds. Here it is right here. Does everyone see that? Praise Yahweh. And it says, "And you shall rejoice at your feast, you and your wives, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite, the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widows in your city." And that comes from Deuteronomy 16, verse 14. Now let's go there. Deuteronomy 16, verse 14. Found on page 161. Deuteronomy 16, verse 14. It says what I just read. Now let's look at verse 15. Verse 15, it says, 7 days you must keep a joyous feast to Yahweh, your Father, at the place He will choose. For Yahweh your Father will bless you in all your income and in the work of your hands, so you will surely have joy. Notice that. So He's telling you, you will surely have joy. Now, if you look up rejoice in the right on Google, it says to feel or show great joy or delight. It says pleasure, joy, and elation. Well, elation, I really didn't know what that word meant, but we'll get into it later. Okay, you can see rejoice means to feel or show great joy or delight, pleasure, joy, and elation. Elation. Okay, now, Yahweh's given us a lot of things to rejoice about. In the 11th book of Yisrayl, this is the end of the ages, part 2. That's the 11th book of Yisrayl. And in it, Pastor gives us one thing that Yahweh's given us to rejoice about. This is the sermon that was given on the last great day of 2011. That's the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And in verse 38, Pastor's showing us what to rejoice about. Okay, and he's talking about the signs from heaven there. It says, well, what could that be for and what signs? There's something Yeshua said. Now, let's go to verse 39, and it says, now look at verse 28. Luke 21, verse 28. Now, this is meant to be encouraging because of the fact that the load has been great. The tests have been great. Okay, so you see there, it's encouraging. These signs are for us to rejoice about, okay? They're not for us to, I just saw a sign today, I'm really mad now. No, it's for us to rejoice about, okay? It says, I know you've suffered, and I'm suffering with you. So this is an encouraging sign to let us know, or encouraging sign to us, and that's why He sent it at this time to let you know. Then in verse 40, it says, in verse 28 says, so when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, lift up your heads. This look up, it means, the meaning of it is cheer up. Be joyful. Show joy to Yahweh through the high priest, of course, Yeshua. Look up and rejoice and show the joy. Okay, now, Pastor's telling us something here, so I went back and looked that up. Here's the interlinear for Luke 21:28. And you see, look up, that comes from word number 352. Can everyone see that? Word number 352 in the Greek. And word number 352, here's 352 in the Greek. and it means I'm elated. Does everyone see that? Elated? Praise Yahweh. Okay, now let's look at that word elation in the dictionary to see just what it means. It means great joy or pride, it says. Then it says gladness and high spirits. Okay? High spirits. So what Pastor's saying here is very correct. Praise Yahweh. Okay, so Pastor says it means to cheer up, and that's what this word elation means. Right from Strong's, it means high spirits or great joy. Now, and even if it also means to look up at the sky as well, though. Because if you're rejoicing and if you're glad, you will be looking up. You won't be looking down like the Pope does when he's all sad. Okay, you'll be looking up, okay? Now, the world has nothing to be glad about. They're depressed right now. Okay, but let's see why we shouldn't be depressed. This is from an article entitled 15 Minutes for Me. It says, because of this negative state of mind, you will notice that you will start to think more and more negatively. You no longer always see the meaning of life, and your will to live reduces. Now also, it says the consuming part of depression is also part of the depression diagnosis. Depression has a much larger influence on your daily life. A depression can cause the following symptoms: headache, muscle ache, worrying, and isolation. Okay, so you see those few things that you get when you're depressed. So let's all rejoice, because we have a lot to rejoice for. One is that we're in the house of Yahweh, and there's nothing better than being in the house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Now that's all I have. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, Deacon Shlomo Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Welcome home, everyone. All right, the great Feast of Tabernacles. Now today I'm going to be talking about rejoicing at the feast. If you could go ahead and turn over to Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23. That's the theme for this feast. It's learning to rejoice. Learning to rejoice. And as you can see in Leviticus 23, we're going to start in verse 34. It says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th moon is a feast of tabernacles for 7 days unto Yahweh. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no regular work upon it. But for 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. On the 8th day you shall have a holy convocation, the last great day, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. It is the closing gathering of Yahweh's sacred year, and you shall do no customary regular work upon it. These are the feasts which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh, a burnt offering, a grain offering, a sacrifice, and drink offerings required on each day." It says, these offerings are in addition to those for Yahweh's Sabbaths, and in addition to your gifts, and whatever you have vowed, and all the freewill offerings you give to Yahweh. And then it starts talking about the Sukkah. It says, "So on the 15th day of the 7th moon, when you have gathered the fruit of your land, you must keep the feast unto Yahweh for 7 days. On the first day there shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day a Sabbath. On the day before you are to take choice fruit from the trees, pomegranates and palm branches, leafy branches, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice in front of Yahweh your Father for 7 days." So you can see that's part of the law of this great Feast of Tabernacles. You shall rejoice in front of Yahweh. Look at verse 41. It says, "You shall keep it as a feast to Yahweh for 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th moon. And you shall live in booths for 7 days. All who are native-born children of Israel shall live in booths, in order that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh, your heavenly Father. So you can see that was all talking about the Feast of Tabernacles and the last great day. Now I'm going to be emphasizing the part on rejoice. If you turn over to Deuteronomy 12, okay, we know we are to seek the habitation of Yahweh, which is the house of Yahweh. That's in verse 5. And it says, and there you must go. Now if you look through verse 6 and 7, it says, there you must bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and special gifts you have vowed to give, your freewill offerings and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. There in front of Yahweh, your Father, you and your family shall eat, and you shall rejoice in all that you have put your hand to do, because Yahweh your Father has blessed you. All right, so there we come here to Yahweh's house to rejoice. You know, we keep the feast, but we also have to rejoice. If you look down to verse 12, it says, and you shall rejoice in front of Yahweh, you and your wives, your sons, your daughters, your men servants, your maidservants, and the Levite who lives within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. And look over to verse 18. It says, but you must eat these in front of Yahweh your Father, in the place Yahweh your Father chooses, you and your wives, your son and your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite who lives within your gates, and you shall rejoice in front of Yahweh your Father in everything you put your hand to do. All right, so now that we've been told to rejoice, let's look at the benefits of rejoicing. All right, this is the 10 impressive benefits of laughter. No. All right, the 10 impressive benefits of laughter. It says here, the health benefits of laughter include the reduction of stress hormones, and blood pressure, as well as an increased blood flow and oxygenation to the cells and organs. Laughing provides a natural workout for a number of muscle groups. It can defend against illnesses and even increase the response of beneficial tumor and disease killing cells throughout the body. Laughter has also been shown to increase memory, intelligence, and creativity. All right, all these things come from just keeping the simple law that Yahweh told us. Reduces stress hormones. It says here, laughter has been shown to reduce the levels of certain stress hormones in the body. Although some of these chemicals are necessary for the certain body in certain situations, high levels without useful application can cause an imbalance in homeostasis and have a behavioral impact. These are called immunosuppressant hormones and can have a harmful effect on the immune system. By lessening the presence and production of these stress hormones through mirthful activity like laughing, the overall health and well-being of a person can be improved. Okay? That's one benefit from laughing. It reduces stress. Another one, it boosts the immune system. It says laughter can even go as far as to help you stay healthy. It has been widely studied that laughter can stimulate antibody cells to develop at faster rates by changing the body's chemistry through hormonal shifts. This increase in antibodies means that the body is able to fight off illnesses and infection easier. T cells are a type of white blood cells known as lymphocytes. Studies have shown that the efficiency of T cells is actually increased in a subject who regularly laughs and adds those hormonal advantages to their overall system. So you can see that another benefit is it boosts your immune system. And then also it improves memory. Alright, and that's one thing that we also have to do at this feast, because there's a lot of information brought out, and we have to have a mind that can absorb in all that information. So rejoicing helps improve your memory. It says, along with the improved brain function that laughter can provide, it can also work to improve memory in a different way. The connections and associations that the brain forms while learning can be widened and made more complex by combining basic learning with an emotional response like laughter or humor. By varying the levels of association with different parts of our brain, pleasure, amusement, logic, reason, etc., remembering facts and recalling details is easier because there are more linkages present in our memory. Alright, it's a lot of big words and stuff, so if you don't understand, feel free to look it up. But, Yahweh tells us to rejoice, and it's to help our body. Alright, and for closing, if you turn to Matthew 5, Matthew 5 verse 12, it's on page 731. Yeshua tells us, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for greatest is your reward in heaven. So if you rejoice, you'll have a great reward in heaven. And with that, if everyone will please stand. Let's turn over to the great Kohan, Shaul Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom once again. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. We're going to continue along this theme of rejoicing before Yahweh. And I want you to realize and really think hard, the world rejoices in sin. All right, with rioting, drunkenness, the shooting, like we just seen in Las Vegas, that's their rejoicing. We rejoice in righteousness, in the knowledge of Yahweh, in the hope of this great coming kingdom. That's why we're here before Yahweh, rejoicing before Yahweh. And I want you to remember, please write down for your notes some of these. 2 Chronicles 7:16. We'll just turn there. 2 Chronicles 7 in verse 16. This is Yahweh speaking here in verse 15. Now my eyes will be open and my ear will hear the prayers from this place. This place. There was only one place in each work where Yahweh chose to place His name. Only one place. And His name is His authority, His character, which is His laws, and His work. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, so my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually at Yahweh's appointed and ordained weekly Sabbaths and feast days, and which we are here right now. This is a feast day Sabbath, right? And Yahweh is among us. Turn over to Deuteronomy 23. Deuteronomy 23. And we'll read 14. For Yahweh your Father moves about in the midst of your camp to protect you. Remember the great prophecies of the protection from the coming destruction. And to give your enemies over to you. Yes, we're going to turn them into friends. We're going to change them from enemies to friends with the peaceful solution. They're going to assist in rebuilding this earth during the 1,000 years. Therefore your camp must be holy, so he may see no unclean thing among you and turn away from you. Now, if you'll look up a few verses here, 12 and 13, just look at that. You can see Yahweh's talking about some fertilizer there, right? Everybody see that? All right, which would make perfect sense. Even in the world, you put that under the ground. Well, not everywhere in the world, but they put it in their water supply. But we do as Yahweh commands, it all goes under the ground. All right, and you can see it's nasty. It's nasty to you. It's nasty to Yahweh. It's important for the bugs, but it's got to be handled and gotten rid of, right? We bury it. We'll turn over to Colossians 3:9, because there's something else that we need to bury that's just as important and actually a lot harder to bury. Takes a lot more effort and energy. Colossians 3:9. Putting to death the old man, burying him in baptism. Baptism, remember, is the watery grave. The watery grave. We get buried in water. That's the meaning of baptism. It says, do not lie to one another. Don't lie to one another. Don't go around saying that something that is sin is righteous. That's the definition of a lie. Don't go saying that obeying Yahweh's laws is wrong. That's a lie. That's the kind of lie he's talking about. The lie in the garden. Genesis 3. Has Yahweh indeed said? Don't lie to one another. We're here learning the truth, and that's what we need to speak. What is the truth? Yahweh's law. Psalm 119. Your word is the truth. Your law is the truth. Do not lie to one another, since you are putting off the old man with his practices. Now, that old man and his practices, I want you to link it with what we saw in Deuteronomy 23, 12, and 13. You come here to relieve yourself of the old man. You're going to go back to it? You're going to dig him up again? Rub him all over you? I want you to see it as nasty is what's in that Deuteronomy 23. All right? Now, Yahweh has placed within us a part of our mind, the carnal mind. This is the old man. This is the carnal mind. Now, the carnal mind hates Yahweh's laws. All right? It's not even really fit for fertilizer. It's worse than the fertilizer. And I'll tell you right now, if you haven't already experienced it, your carnal mind in the very beginning, you've got to force yourself, like Pastor said, to start keeping the Sabbath. Because the carnal mind is going to rebel. It's going to rebel against you when you try to change your heart and mind to fit Yahweh's character. The carnal mind is that heart, the human heart. Remember, the world teaches you, follow your heart. Well, Yahweh says, he who follows his heart is a fool, and the heart is deceitfully and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Yahweh can know it. And Yahweh tells us about it, and he tells us to fight like hell against it. Fight the carnal mind. Don't fight the Kohans, the Kohanas, the judges, your counselors. Fight your own carnal mind. Argue with your carnal mind. I'll tell you, your carnal mind is going to kick. It's going to scream at you. It's going to rebel. It's going to use human logic. Human logic is the worthless thing in the world, because it'll provide you justification for breaking Yahweh's laws. And when we get here, you're going to see the justification. You'll see in your own mind justification pop up. I guarantee you here when I show you something. And reasoning to talk you back into committing sin. Remember Proverbs 14:12. There's a way that seems right to a man. Seems normal. It seems reasonable. Well, that's the way I was raised. That's the way we always did things. That's just my culture. That's just who I am. All those words there are the carnal mind railing against Yahweh. So if you hear those coming out of your mouth or you hear them in your mind, put them to death. Bury them like you do the other stuff. Get rid of it. You don't go hunting the other stuff, do you? Get rid of it the same way. Get it out. All right? But the thing that seems right to a man, the result is death. Yahweh says, come out and be separate and learn a new way. My way. Remember, he said, my ways aren't your ways. And we've all came out of Christianity, Catholicism. Catholics rule the world. Revelation 12:9. 1 Yochanan 5:19. Deuteronomy 17. All shows that the Catholic Church rules the world, and it rules every individual's heart and mind. Now, Pastor's been using the original Formula 1, going back to our analogy here, the original Formula 1, to get rid of that waste. It's waste. We need to get rid of it. Psalm 119, verse 9 says, how can a young man or a young person cleanse their ways? By taking heed to my laws. Now, one of the sins I want to speak about that we need to get rid of as much as the other stuff and bury it and never bring it back up again is visiting. Now, can you hear the justifications coming back up? Trying to come back up in your mind why you should be able to visit? This is a terrible sin that was brought forth by the Catholic Church. And I'm talking about going over to another person's tent, camper, campsite, mobile home, tent, whatever it can be used to live in, shoebox, shipping crate, storage unit. If you live in it, if a brother lives in it, that's his dwelling. Turn over to Proverbs 25. We want to rejoice before Yahweh, and we do the things that are pleasing in Yahweh's sight so that we get Yahweh's protection, so that we get the character of Yahweh, and so we get this entrance into Yahweh's kingdom. But we can't get that by going our own way. All right? It's so important. Now, Proverbs 25:17, the way we had it is how some other translations, be an infrequent visitor in your brother's house. You can draw a line through that. The King James had it right. It says, withdraw your foot from your brother's house. The word withdraw means to remove, to inhibit, to restrain. Restrain your foot from your brother's house, to hold back or keep from some action, to prohibit or forbid. I'm talking about going over to someone else's dwelling, whatever they dwell in. This is forbidden by Yahweh. And it only leads to curses, brethren. So don't go there. You know where you visit? There's plenty of opportunities for visiting and fellowship here at Yahweh's house. This building is the number one place. There's a few others. The Buffalette, having a meal there. There's where we enjoy meals together. We're going to enjoy one today with Pastor. How much better can you get than that? Or the concession stands, the restaurant, Abel's kitchen. At Yahweh's house, learning together, working together, eating together, doing the work together. This is how we have our fellowship. Not sitting around. Turn over to 1 Timothy. Because many sins, many, over the years, I'll tell you, it would curl your hair to hear the things that have arisen out of breaking what Yahweh says to do here. And remember, in the law, he says, every man remain in their own place. Our own place is either our own dwelling, or at the house of Yahweh doing the work of Yahweh, or at the classes, or at the community meals, the places where meals are served. That is our place. Not going into someone else's house, traipsing in our uncleanness into their private area. And then lust starts to creep in. This is the first sin in mixed company. That's why we have the wall here. Do you think you can leave here and go to somebody else's house and do this? No way. And be right with Yahweh? No way. First thing that occurs is a husband sees the man's wife or daughter and starts to lust. Or the wife or daughter sees the man and his sons and they start to lust, and so on. In 1 Timothy 5:13, and now this is talking about women, but this activity applies to everybody that does this. And they also learn to waste their time. Not trained for the kingdom in going around from house to house, but even worse, they learn to be gossips and busybodies, talking about things they should not. Now I know your carnal mind may be rising up right now and coming up with a million justifications why you have to go to that person's house. Well, guess what? If you want to be in the kingdom, brethren, brothers and sisters, tell that voice, no, get behind me, Satan. And let's all get in unity with this so that Yahweh doesn't leave this camp, heading train, taking the train or for somewhere else. I know he's not going to do that, but our names will be out of the book of life if we don't follow this. So please, let's make this the holiest, most righteous feast to Yahweh ever in history, okay? Everybody in agreement? Praise Yahweh. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If everyone will please stand. I now have the great privilege of turning the services over to the great Kohan, David Yehuda Hawkins.
Shalom. It says an army lives on its stomachs. This army lives on the books, I think. Please be seated. I wanted to talk about some things. I gave some of this information before, but I wanted to add to it. So if you will, please turn in your book of Yahweh to page 61 and look at Exodus 19, verse 20. I've got about 15 hours, so I want to get this done real quick. Oh, that was 15 minutes. Exodus 19, verse 20 on page 61. Now, everybody out there thinks that Yahweh came down up on Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahweh called Moshe to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up, and everybody thinks they shook hands and had a couple of beers and all this other stuff. That's not exactly the way it was. In fact, it wasn't at all the way it was. The word mount and mountain that are written in Exodus 19:20 are translated from the Hebrew word har. This word is listed on page 371 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means mountain of the house of Yahweh. Both Micaiah chapter 4, 1 and 2, and Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 say, it's not only the mountain of the house of Yahweh, the mountain goes up. So it means the house of Yahweh is being uplifted. The word Sinai that is written in Exodus 19, verse 20 is translated from the Hebrew word Sini. A Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, page 972, 977, and 987 shows this word means instruction, precept, writing, to inculcate. In other words, to try to get everybody to take on this type of characteristic. To impress. He wasn't showboating or trying to make a show out of it. In other words, he's trying to get your attention. Generally, to teach. Does anyone know what that word means? If you don't, look it up. To teach. And I would assume everyone knows that there's supposed to be teachers here, especially when it comes to the peaceful solution. All right, Gesenius Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Edward Robinson, page 720, also shows this word Sinai means is in the Ishmaelic dialect of the Semitic tongue, in other words, Arabic now. Abel, Moshe, the Atbash code, Aleph Tav. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And Torah. What is the Torah? What is it? All right. Of whom? Oh, you mean to tell me federal law that is not the Torah? We're not going to buck up against federal law, but we want to make sure you know which is which. And as the Kohan before me said, you pick the right one and you keep it with you. All right, we're going to have to look at this, all these things. This is important to know, that there's an Atbash code in the meaning of that word. I have had many people say they don't really understand the Atbash code. At first, I want you to see this Atbash, a method of interchanging the first letter of the alphabet Aleph and the last Tav, and so forth. But look at the bottom. It said the rule of Atbash. The word rule, law, what you're told to do. In other words, instructions, commands, all that. It also means code, like code of conduct and so forth. It is a code within the Bible. And this is from the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, Volume 1, page 134 in one version, 139 in another, and 131 in a PDF version. The information hasn't changed, but it's different publishers and so forth. Okay. One thing people need to know, the Atbash code is a Bible code that doesn't stop at the end of Malachi. Every Bible code I know of, other than this one, ends at Malachi, because it is presumed that the Bible was never written in Hebrew, starting with the book of Matithia on. It's accepted, it is a Greek New Testament. And that's why everybody gets, all of the pundits, they get out there a little cynically and say, sounds like Greek to me. The point of the matter is there's a lot more to it than you think. It does sound like Greek to me. Anytime you get a teaching that tolerates adultery, fornication, drunkenness, homosexuality, and there are churches, every one of them. You go to one church and they got a big wine glass. You got to sip from the glass. And I guarantee you some of those guys, they take several big belts of it. You got gay churches. Now, I'm not trying to attack anything. I'm talking about different sins. Sodomy is a sin. So is adultery. But they tell you Jesus forgave you. Accept Him in your heart. I don't know how big that guy was, but your heart's not that big. So I don't know how he gets in there. But they try to tell you. But the Atbash code is different. It goes all the way from the very first verse of Genesis to the entire book of Revelation. They didn't get rid of it. They got rid of the others. There are no Bible codes for Matithia. They thought the new covenant is safe. There's no way to dispute it. The Revelation says, blessed are those who keep all of the commandments in the King James and in the others, all of the laws. But they look at it, the law of Christ. Well, their Jesus in their own Bible says, what I tell you is what my Father told me. And He said, if you want to enter into life, keep the law. Even the Greek didn't get rid of that one. But it sure got rid of a lot of other things. It says in one place, the law is a good thing. That's Apostle Shaul quoting him verbatim in his Greek. I don't think he wrote in Greek, but somebody wrote it for him in Greek. And he says that he didn't even know the difference between right and wrong until he learned the law, the Torah. But the Atbash code is important. It points out and it gives you a proof that the Holy Scriptures are one, unified. They are not two testaments, it is just one testament. And may I plead with you never to forget that. But I'm going to show you the proof of the Atbash code. Remember, we showed on this thing, it's Aleph Tau. That's the first code. There are at least 22 so far. You go backwards and it makes it 44. And that's not a gun. But the thing of it is, the Aleph Tau. This is Genesis 1:1. And everything. Is where that's that little button right there. Do you see this? Aleph Tau. Notice, it's not even translated. The Aleph Tau. It said, in the beginning, He created. Of course, they use the Canaanite word for God, Elohim. But look at the Aleph Tau. They don't know how to translate it, so they leave it untranslated. That's because it's not a word to translate. It's an Atbash code. Aleph Tau. And so that shows the code started in Genesis 1:1. Now for the gravy on the potatoes, so to speak. This is the book of Revelation in Hebrew. Here it is, right there. And it says, the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, which Yahweh gave unto him. And you know what they put there in many places? They put the name Yahweh, not God. This is the King Jimmy version over here. To show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. But look, in the Hebrew, there's that Aleph Tau. From Genesis 1:1 to the last verse of Revelation. And we're going to have more on that during the feast about the type of place those who keep all the law are going to enter into. But that's what it's about. You now see, this is not just a bunch of talk from somebody whose family came here from Poland to get away from the Holocaust. It's true. The Hebrew experts, and these people are from Oxford and places like that, say it's that. But the word, okay, but it says, but this word is not only showing that this is talking about something that's forever. It always was, it is, and always will be, as Ecclesiastes 1, 9 and 10 say. It is talking about something that affects you. And it will affect you this whole feast if you'll listen to what anybody's saying up that's been sent here. Especially the one sent. But this word also means not only Aleph and Tau, the Atbash code, today, yesterday, and tomorrow, and forever. It also means, according to the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary of Marcus Jastrow, volume 2, page 983, this word means Sinai. Remember, it shows it with an Atbash code. It showed it was Abel, Moshe, all those things. It also means this. It means revelation. A certain teacher who cannot be disputed will figure all of this out. And who is that teacher? What does he teach? Which are the truth. And don't worry, just remember it, okay? The word top, we got through that one. The word top that is written in Exodus 19:20 is translated from the Hebrew word rush. A Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, pages 205, 1272, 1457, and 1461 shows this word traces back to a form of the Hebrew word Abel. So this is what Exodus 19:20 is saying. And Yahweh came down to the house of Yahweh at Abel to teach his law. And Yahweh called Moshe to the house of Yahweh at Abel, and Moshe went up. And Yahweh revealed to him and them that an indisputable teacher who would understand all these things would come and teach those he has called out. This is not only a law, it is a prophecy. Now that we're fired up on prophecy, please take your book of Yahweh and turn to page 22. Page 22. And don't worry, this will be the last scripture. Genesis 28, verses 1 and 2. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, or Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there, of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. The word Canaan that is written in Genesis 28:1 is translated from the Hebrew word kanon. This word is listed on page 397 in PDF of Volume 2 of the Lingua Sacra by David Levi, which shows this word means a merchant or seller whose balances of deceit are in his hands. In other words, a deceiver, better known as a liar. The word padan that is written in Genesis 28:2 is translated from the Hebrew word padan. A Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament with Julius First, page 1114, shows this word means to separate, to deliver from death. Is that not what the mission of the house of Yahweh is? To call you out that you be delivered from death? The word Aram that is written in Genesis 28:2 is translated from the Hebrew word Aram. A Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament, Julius First, pages 150 and 151, along with Isaiah 2 verses 1 and 2 and Micaiah 4, 1 and 2, letting Scripture interpret Scripture, show this word means house of Yahweh. We sure get that a lot, don't we? The name Bethuel that is written in Genesis 28:2 is translated from the Hebrew word, from the compound Hebrew word Bethuel, which is actually a mongrel word compounded of the Hebrew word Bait and the Canaanite word El. The Hebrew word Bait is listed on page 198 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means house of Yahweh. The Canaanite word El, as listed on pages 29 and 31 of a complete Hebrew and English critical and pronouncing dictionary by William L. Roy, shows this word is correctly the Hebrew word Ayil and means Yahweh, the eternal Father, the self-existent, unoriginated, independent, and eternal Yahweh. So this is what Genesis 28 verses 1 and 2 is saying. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of those deceivers, those liars who seek to convince others that a lie is the truth. Just like Kohan Shaul just told you. Arise, go to the house of Yahweh. Does that mean go to Joe's Bar and Grill or Mama Leone's house? No. Or the girl that lives down the road or the guy that lives up the road? No. It said go to the house of Yahweh. The people who have been separated by Yahweh to be delivered from death, to the house of Yahweh, the eternal Father, the heavenly Father of your mother, and take yourself a wife from there, of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. These were people that were going to the house of Yahweh at that time. And they were not walking around going to each other's houses and gossiping. Or as they say now, bull sessions. I mean, I got tired of it. I remember I'd be walking down the road here. Well, I never heard anything like that in all my life. That woman ought to be ashamed of herself. Well, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for back talking here, talking behind her back. That's backbiting. You go in that house, you're backbiting. So, what this thing is, this is not history here. This is the law of Yahweh. You don't go across the ocean to a country in the Far East to get a wife that has never, ever met Yahweh. You don't do anything like that. If you want to get married, the house of Yahweh will help you do it if you follow their instructions. Today, this is what it's all about. I have just finished what I was talking about. The point I'm trying to make is, believe these scriptures. They're telling you something. You heard 2 laws today, and you're having a law class tonight. I mean, you're going to have a great time. And that's what it's all about. Don't go to a deceiver across the ocean or across the street or down the highway. Go to the house of Yahweh. I personally know people that did that. They went to the house of Yahweh, and the house of Yahweh helped them marry a girl from the house of Yahweh. And believe it or not, that marriage is going strong. And that's the way it should be. You have just had two laws brought to you. I praise Yahweh that I was given the privilege to tell you about them in the Advice Code, that I could show you that it's not just a bunch of talk. It's real. It's in the lexicons. It's in the interlinears. Even in the New Testament. They can't say the Bible codes quit at Malachi any longer. It's a lie. When the whole book of Revelation is part of the code. With that, may Yahweh bless your understanding. And I will clear out here. And I will introduce you to a great Kohan, Ilya Hawkins. But if you'll pardon me, I've got to clean up. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Now, in playing the news today, the one thing we want to get into everyone's mind, if it's your first feast, you'll see things that are history that has been in the making for years. If you've been here for a long time, you actually see the words of Yahweh's last day's witness coming to pass, even though through ridicule, through arrest, through people just saying many evil things, slandering him. We actually today can see these things coming to pass. And we have some things to show you in the news to show how much is actually coming to pass, just like he said, as he's seen it through the prophets and the apostles and the writings provided in the book of Yahweh. Now, the first thing that they're showing now, the animals, they're worried about the animals actually transmitting diseases to humans through the use of antibiotics. 80% of all antibiotics used in the world today is given to our food supply. Now, scientists are saying now that they're seeing where the gut of an animal can develop this superbug, and through the consumption of this animal, it's going to go straight into the human. And the human will develop this same superbug, already mutated into its advanced stage. Pastor's been bringing that for years. And then, of course, I'm sure most of you have heard about what occurred in Las Vegas. No longer is it what takes place in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Remember, they promoted that as Sin City. That's always been promoted that way. But what they got to see for this last week, and it's sad that it took place, that's the full maximum potential of sin. Someone taking a lot of lives, snapping. And if you notice in the news, they say, we see what he done, but we don't know why he did it. We could take the youngest child, girl or boy, and they could sit down and they could explain to Congress and the Senate and the President of the United States right now exactly what occurred and how it took place. But of course, they're not seeing that. Their minds are shut off at this time, some of them, but we're seeing some things open up. And then in Spain, remember Spain is in that fourth part of the earth and specifically dealing with Catalonia. There's a referendum where the people in Catalonia were seeking independence. But watch to see how the police treat the people as they show up to vote. It's supposed to be their democratic right to show up to vote. Watch how they treat them. Watch how they beat them. You're going to see an elderly lady that they literally have hit across the face with a baton. I don't know if they broke her nose or what, but it's the violence. And of course, that's pure Catholic over there. You want to break away from the Catholic Church, that's a no-no, even though many people are doing it every day. And then, of course, with 2016, we see the same thing as we've seen with 2015. The new study comes in, the latest, greatest study comes in, STDs now at an all-time high. Every new year, that's the thing they say. STDs now at an all-time high. And then something very interesting was Saudi Arabia and Russia. Those are two countries who you very seldom hear things about, but they actually just made an arms deal. And remember, they're the two largest oil producers. Russia being number one, they bypassed Saudi Arabia just a few years ago, but they're now signing oil contracts also. Remember, Russia said it will not do oil with the petrodollar. That's a lot of money lost for this war that the United States funds with the petrodollar. And then we get into, after speeches at the United Nations in the last few weeks, we get into Kim Jong-un, who is the leader of North Korea, actually referring to President Trump as a dotard, which is a senile old man. Now that is in response to President Trump calling him a rocket man. then Secretary of State. Now remember, the Secretary of State is supposed to be the chief diplomat for the president. When he travels, that is the spokesman of the president. He represents the president and his office. Well, that's Rex Tillerson, and it's recently been reported that he referred to President Trump. I won't use the word before it, we'll just say moron. But he called him you'll see it in the news, a moron. But there's bad blood there, and a house divided against itself cannot stand. And you see things crumbling. And everyone is wondering what's on President Trump's mind. Well, after that, you're going to see, it takes you back. We've showed this a few weeks ago, and you're just going to see very small clips. Pastor said that when a child enters kindergarten, it's ready to kill in the United States, in the world today, because of what they've been taught and what they haven't been taught. And then by the time that child is 10 or 12 years of age, it's doing some deadly things. Well, then it shows you how Pastor was ridiculed about this nuclear baby, and especially Nancy Grace asked him, how long is the gestation of this baby? When is it coming? How did you deceive your people? But we're going to show you how, of course, Pastor explained about Admiral Fallon, but you also have North Korea, whose nuclear program was born in 2006. And we show you how everything has went right along with the plan, with this growing and growing and growing. Well, now it's 11 years old. And they feel they have to defend themselves against this tyrant country. And they're looking for nuclear war. And it literally ends now with not only Hawaii planning for a nuclear attack, but now you have California seriously planning what to do in case of a nuclear attack. Why is everyone not saying, Yisrayl Hawkins told us this before it ever started? That's what we're here to do, because that's how they're going to come. They're going to come to you and say, the House of Yahweh said it before it ever took place. Teach me more. At this time, if we could please go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, superbugs from antibiotics, where? In your foods, no other place. STDs on the rise, and of course, nuclear war at the ready among the nations are just a few of the articles we have for you today. But first, we're going to start with antibiotics are turning livestock into superbug factories. In the United States, nearly 80% of antibiotics are taken not by humans, but cows, pigs, and chickens. Farmers feed these drugs to their livestock to prevent disease and to help them grow faster. Over 130 tons of antibiotics are distributed to livestock every year globally, leading to higher rates of antibiotic-resistant superbugs. This has researchers worried that antibiotic genes may transfer from an animal's gut to human.
Research has also shown that people living close to pig farms are 30% more likely to be infected with MRSA. Now, experts recommend capping antibiotic use. Currently, there are no limits, as well as a 50% tax on antibiotics and limiting meat consumption by humans.
Well, the recent gunman who killed 58 and injured nearly 500 in Las Vegas, Nevada, wasn't on a suicide mission, but had his eyes on other targets. Investigators are still trying to assess why 64-year-old Stephen Paddock embarked on a killing spree in Las Vegas. With his planning so elaborate, authorities think he may have had an accomplice. Clark County Sheriff Joseph Lombardo said in a press conference that Paddock spent years acquiring weapons and ammo and living a secret life, much of what will never be understood.
New footage and police investigations reveal a more complete timeline. At 10:05 p.m., Paddock fired from the window at the Mandalay Bay Hotel and continued for 10 minutes until 10:15 p.m. Now, at 10:18, he fired more than 200 rounds through the door of his room, wounding hotel security. After that, the shooting stopped. Now, shots fired from the suspect's 32nd floor room not only hit people, but aviation tanks. Now, investigators are trying to determine if those were stray or intentional.
Randy Sutton, a retired police officer in Las Vegas, Nevada there, and a consultant for CBS News, said this man had training because of his tremendous tactics. He said he wonders who helped him to train and to use those weapons as he did.
In Catalan, Spain, a battle is taking place at the ballot boxes. Over 300 people have been injured in clashes with the police. Now, preceding the Catalan referendum, Catalans lined up by the thousands to vote, while the Spanish National Police forced their way from one voting center to another, violently removing peaceful voters downstairs, hitting them with batons, and removing ballot boxes.
National police also clashed with local police over the use of force. The complaint coming from the local police, of course. Catalan's Education Minister Clara Obiols said that what the national police were doing was a crime. Violating human rights, injuring people, that is a crime. The video footage shows national police battering protesters with batons and firing rubber bullets at them. Not even the elderly were spared violence from police forces, as one particular woman, and there were many others, but it was caught on video, was pushed and hit on the head, of course, wounding that woman in the process.
Wow. Well, protesters are expecting police to use force, but the numbers of protesters are rising, not diminishing, as even whole families, including children, have showed up to cast their vote.
Yeah, what a horrible environment to be in. Well, the polls are also in for a saddening reality here in the United States as well. Larry McGee is reporting on that story for us, as well as several others. Larry, what do you have?
Frightening news for the microbiomes of both the earth and men alike. STDs have reached their peak and are now reported to be at an all-time high. According to an annual report recently released by the CDC, there were 1.6 million new cases of chlamydia, 470,000 new cases of gonorrhea, and 28,000 people newly afflicted with syphilis. The report took particular notice of the rise among certain groups. Gonorrhea detected in men increased by 22%, while close to half of the new chlamydia cases were in women. And infection with syphilis among newborns was up 28%. And what many are hoping is a shift away from the ineffective and dangerous philosophy of safe sex through condoms. The CDC is reported to be suggesting that state and local health officials refocus on prevention as well as treatment of sexually transmitted disease. Information is also getting out that being populated with sexually transmitted pathogens is not without its consequences. The infections are reported to cause serious health problems, including infertility, neurological issues, and increased risk for HIV. Analysts blame the latest rise on funding cutbacks for education and healthcare programs, while others are pointing a finger at the growing popularity of dating apps. Growing cooperation between Russia and Saudi Arabia has many people taken notice following a recent trip to Moscow by Arabia's King Salman. The Saudi head is the first monarch from the nation to visit Russia. Talks between the two leaders is said to have centered around economic issues and the crisis in the Euphrates region. According to the Kremlin, both Putin and Salman have underlined the need for a peaceful solution to the conflicts in the Middle East and have joined hands to create a joint energy fund reported to be worth $1 billion. Concerning things of lesser value, when cheap insults and name-calling takes place among world leaders, one can't help but take a moment to question where the world is headed. For the first time in history, a leader from the DPRK addressed an international audience to inform everyone listening that he had taken President Trump's recent bout of name-calling personally. The North Korean leader countered the president's remarks with the threat of retaliation in the form of a nuclear test explosion over the Pacific. Mr. Un threatened to make President Trump pay dearly for his recent speech in front of the UN, where he referred to the North Korean head as Rocket Man and stated that he was on a suicide mission. In response, Jong-un called President Trump a dotard, as well as a rogue and a gangster who's playing with fire. The back and forth of negative communication is only serving to increase tensions and is isolating some of the DPRK's most important allies, such as China, who have ordered their banks to cease business with the nation. Despite it all, however, North Korea is reported to have carried out its sixth and largest nuclear test this month, to which U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, has stated that America will not run scared. If the U.S. or any of its allies are attacked by North Korea for any reason, she says, the U.S. will respond. Period. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, certainly the name calling from some of our world leaders are not going to help the situation.
That's right.
Well, Kim Jong-un isn't the only person criticizing the president's leadership abilities these days. NBC News reported his own Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, is at odds with the president. Now, while the State Department didn't deny it, they would not agree with the rumor either. However, about a dozen sources were telling news media there is real tension between the two.
One source reported that the Secretary of State had called the president a moron, using foul language in front of moron. This came after the president was talking about a strategy in Afghanistan and comparing it to how the 21 Club, that's one of clubs, the favorite clubs that the president frequents, was renovated. That was in New York.
Well, there is the idea that a lot of bad blood exists within the White House. Now, during this administration, while Rex Tillerson is very close to General Mattis, speaking with him daily, the Secretary of State is kind of a loner. Tillerson travels with a very small staff, and it is known his relationship with Jared Kushner in the past has been tense as well. Now, to put it simply, he hasn't made a lot of friends.
Well, just one day after North Korea threatened to shoot down American warplanes, President Trump says the U.S. armed forces are totally ready to respond. Now, the president feels Kim Jong-un is acting badly and has vowed to fix the mess in North Korea.
At a press conference in the Rose Garden, President Trump talked about new economic sanctions against the country, as well as the need for more diplomatic pressure. However, military action sounds more and more like a viable option to the leader of the United States.
Well, at a press conference for his reaction to the news that the North Korean government has threatened to take aim or shoot down American planes flying in international airspace, Trump didn't hold back, saying it would be, quote, devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option. If we have to take it, we will.
Well, Yisrayl Hawkins has been warning the world that it is headed for nuclear war given its current course. Let's watch a brief video to lead into our next news segment.
Every child that enters kindergarten is a potential killer. And by the time he gets through kindergarten and up to where he's 10 to 12 years of age.
You predicted the end of the world via a nuclear baby that was to occur in September of 2006, September 12, as I recall. Well, that has passed. Then it moved up to 2007. It is currently 2008. What happened to the nuclear baby?
Well, Jeff, it's interesting that Yisrayl Hawkins did prophesy of nuclear war starting back in 2006. But as he said, war doesn't start with the dropping of the bomb. Comes with a lot of planning.
That's right.
And, of course, missile testing as well. And it's very interesting to look back at the history of North Korean nuclear program because that, in fact, lines right up with the birth of the nuclear baby.
In 2006, Korean state TV came out saying, "We carried out a safe and successful nuclear test." Now, the news made North Korea the world's 9th nuclear power. Just last month on 9/11, Director General of the IAEA, Yokiya Amano, reminded us of this in his opening statement to the Board of Governors. Now, speaking about the most current test, Amano said this new test, the sixth and largest since, and he mentioned 2006, is in complete disregard of the repeated demands of the international community, actually recognizing the fact that North Korea has been testing since 2006.
Interesting. Well, then in 2009, North Korea claimed yet a more powerful underground nuclear test. It created an earthquake which registered 4.7 to 5 on the Richter scale. It was the equivalent of 2 kilotons of explosive or a small nuclear weapon.
Jumping ahead to 2012, Pyongyang launched a long-range rocket. Then in 2013, North Korea conducted its third underground nuclear test. In 2015, a picture came out showing Kim Jong-un with what state-run media called a miniaturized nuclear warhead.
Making further claims of advancing their program, the North Korean leader also announced his country developed a hydrogen bomb, though U.S. and other outside experts were skeptical at the time. And yet again in 2016, North Korea claimed it conducted a, quote, higher-level nuclear warhead test.
In March 2017, Kim Jong-un's regime began stepping up its missile testing. They fired 5 ballistic missiles in 2 launches, which all fell into the Sea of Japan. Then in April, North Korea fired a ballistic missile into the waters off its east coast. The missile traveled 117 miles and was said to be practice for targeting U.S. bases in Japan. And of course, that's what everybody's worried about now, is will they go after those bases?
Interesting. Well, during this past summer, things got even more tense when in July, North Korea fired its first intercontinental ballistic missile. The ICBM would have a range of at least 3,500 miles, capable of reaching Alaska.
A second ICBM was tested shortly after to show U.S. cities are now within its target range, the regime said. Currently, officials believe that North Korea has constructed a nuclear warhead small enough to fit on a missile. And North Korea has said it is seriously reviewing a plan to strike the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam with missiles.
But with all the planning and the war of words back and forth, Jeff, why haven't we had nuclear war yet? Well, Yisrayl Hawkins predicted that this would take place in 2006, and many people are saying, well, where's the war? Where's the nuclear war? Well, let's look back once again to that interview he had with Nancy Grace for the answers.
The nuclear baby was prophesied to take place at that time, and if you got the articles, now we published that book before the date was to take place. But after we published the book, then, the news articles started coming in showing the nuclear pains of a baby or a nuclear war that is going to take place. Nancy, this is going to take place, and it's taking place right now.
My question is, you convinced your followers...
They are getting ready for nuclear war.
Yes, I'm sure they are. But you convinced your followers that there would be a nuclear war in 2006 and 2007. It hasn't happened. What became of the prophecy? How were you so misled by Yahweh?
I wasn't misled, and I didn't mislead the people either.
If you're not going to answer...
My prophecies are coming to pass. Yes, they're coming to pass now.
How long is the gestation period on this nuclear baby? I mean, it's been a long time, since 2000, 2006, 2007.
And, of course, Yahweh held back the nuclear war, of course. Yahweh held back the nuclear war, and he's holding it back. But it won't be held back for long.
So it's being held back, but knowing the age of North Korea's nuclear program, we can see it won't be held back much longer, Katan. Worrying of a pending nuclear war is evident as several states in America are now actively working out the cost of a nuclear war for their state as well as emergency planning.
California has been counting the cost and recently released an official report predicting the potential effects of a nuclear strike on their state. In the report, there is estimated to be a huge loss of life, many more exposed to poisonous radiation, and of course, the destruction of infrastructure. The damages totaling up to $1 trillion for the state of California alone.
Hawaii also fears the threat of a nuclear strike, and officials there have been planning what they could do if there was an attack. Details from a secret meeting were leaked revealing several things. First, residents will be advised to prepare for a possible nuclear strike as they would for a tsunami or a hurricane. Now, the state also hopes to give a 12-minute warning for people to find shelter, which really is not a lot of time. Finally, survivors would be advised to stay indoors for up to 72 hours to avoid exposure to radiation.
Well, Renee Carayol, an author and political analyst, recently explained to RT why the U.S. and North Korea confrontation is so disturbing. He said, for years and years and years, every one of Donald Trump's predecessors has faced the unpredictable, bellicose, and sometimes weird North Korea. How's he been dealt with? Well, predictably, diplomatic actions, sanctions if need be, but no one has ever reacted like this.
Carayol went on to say, we are in the most worrying time since the Second World War. Why? I'm not sure it's North Korea. I think for the first time ever, it's America that's unpredictable. And will there be any sort of conflagration and any sort of military engagement, which that word conflagration means an extensive burning of the land. But he went on to say, we are still hoping no, but it's getting less and less stable.
Scary.
Well, as you can see, there are certainly these analysts that are realizing we are very close to this point of nuclear war. So if you'd like to learn more about what you can do to avoid the nuclear war, how to survive it, contact the House of Yahweh today. And when you do, don't forget to ask for your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write the House of Yahweh at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to www.ypnnews.com. And for email, you can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And for those of you who enjoy studying the Holy Scriptures, the most accurate and not to mention free study resource on the internet is available for your use, and you can find those two programs, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael program, by going to www.yisraelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, another exciting message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
If everyone will please stand. Now, it's very important everyone understands North Korea tried to detonate a nuclear device in July of 2006, but it failed. Their first successful nuclear detonation and the birth of their program came after September 12, 2006, just like it was prophesied, and it has grown to what we see today. And now I would like to introduce the greatest teacher that told us that, the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins.
Oh, wow. Hey, look at this. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, it's beautiful. Yahweh, do you see this? Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. You're such a beautiful sight. I don't know if you realized it or not, but Yahweh held that war back for you. For you. Oh, boy. To get you ready for the greatest kingdom, greatest job you could ever look forward to. Welcome home, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The announcements, don't forget the peaceful scene, they said. That'll be open for the females and on the third day of the feast. If you get a chance to look at it, there's some ancient buggies down there on the south side of the peaceful scene. One of them has a convertible top on it. That was a doctor's buggy, the last being made in 1934. Yes, that's what they told us. They had a slow-moving sign on it, and I said we need to take that off because they didn't have those back then. And when they took it off, there was a brass tag on it that I actually gave the company that made it. And the man told our great deacon, E.O. White, he said the last one of these and this one was made in 1934. And I said, oh, well, couldn't be better. Doctors, that's how he got family doctors. That's how they went out to see their patients and came to Dad's house the same way. And, of course, by the time they got there, the baby is already delivered. He said, how's your wife, Ode? Okay, great, put that down. You got a name for the baby yet? No? Well, when you get a name for the baby, we'll call me. Well, that's about the way it went, the examination. The baby okay? Yeah, that's it. And the records are kept, of course, in Lexington, Oklahoma, which are going to be quite a bit of pictures presented on this feast by the missionary group. We have a family meal right at the end of services today. Wonderful. This is how visiting should be and should take place. In the house, among everyone. Nothing to hide in here, right? And you're at your best. I hope you're at your best always and try to get that way. We have some new techniques for helping the children. You children now have, listen to this, are you listening, children? Your children now have your own CD disc with children's music and songs. There's also a new adult disc, I understand, with music and songs. This will help you a great deal in getting the children's attention. This will help you children a great deal in getting your parents' attention. Teach me, Daddy. Teach me, Mother. Yank on their pants or their dress if you have to. We also have, for the first time, a children's calendar. You get that? Praise Yahweh. That is exciting. Their own children's calendar for the first time. You can be teaching your parents what day it is and what occurred on this day. Boy, there's all kinds of stuff in that. Even prophecy. That's what I want to harp on this feast is the prophecy. We have a huge gathering that's going to take place by you. It's already in motion. You're just you're the group that will take over this huge gathering to teach them and be separated into different groups to teach these people. So you better learn while you're here. Everything that's done here, from cleanliness to cooking meals to serving meals, it's all going to be done, in that group. But they're going to have their full time of eating and studying and teaching what they learn, and then teach what they learn. This is going to be a short work, Yahweh calls it. I can't go into it in detail right now, but it's going to be a short work that you're going to do to get these people prepared as helpers. As helpers. Now that's 2 billion. I don't know how many billion that you're going to resurrect but you're going to need these people as helpers, and that's what you're going to be training them for. Now that's the job, just a portion of the job that Yahweh is training you for now. The greatest job in the universe is yours. All Yahweh tells you to do, He don't care how smart you are, how brilliant you are. All you have to do is show Yahweh how submissive you are, like a child, willing to learn. I'll get these tears away from me here in a little bit, maybe. The pastor of the House of Yahweh asked the world to listen to his message to end global tensions and global warming, in fact, but global tensions, which you saw how they're mounting, and this could end at any time. That one was put out last week on the 29th. If you can imagine this many news agencies running this thing. 206,150 news agency running that one article. Yeah. The one this week, we just put it in, pastor of the House of Yahweh says he will explain who is really deceived, There won't be any doubts about it if you just set your mind and listen. And this is in a newsletter also that's going out to the world right now. We're on the top at Google again with this article. So we're gathering. This has to do with this great gathering. We're gathering in minds, not in numbers right now, but in their minds they are being gathered by knowledge that Yahweh is taking forth, and He prophesied it. The great thing about Yahweh, He can foretell the future. The greatest thing in the world right now, He has power. He has power to protect you and His work, and He shows that all through the Holy Scriptures. If you would just look, He gave the world to Satan because mankind chose Satan. So He gave the world to her, but He says you can only do so much. He limited what she can do with mankind. He brought through His work for 6,000 years, prophesied in the beginning. You were prophesied back in Genesis. You were. Everybody here and everyone that's listening to me out there that can't get here, you were prophesied. This man cut himself off from Yahweh. There was no salvation. There was none. The tree of life was cut plumb off from Yahweh, from the mankind. You could live like Yahweh said. You could qualify, but you won't live until you get it through this last day's house. That is when Yahweh said, in the last days I will establish my house. Why would He have to establish it if it come through for 6,000 years? It didn't. It came up to Yeshua. He was born. He paid for our sins. And then in the last days I will establish my house. It will teach my ways. His ways weren't taught to the world. The warnings were sent out by the prophets that you're doing the wrong thing. It's going to bring this upon you. The great thing about Yahweh, He can see your actions today, and He can tell you exactly what those actions will bring 30, 40, 100 years later, or thousands of years later, because your actions today will actually affect future generations. If we train ourselves in Yahweh's laws, our actions will bring forth peace, joy, abundant love, abundant living, abundant joy. Rejoice. That's what the great sign says up on top of the sanctuary that our great elder Kohan Heimerman Hawkins put up, him and his crew. of workers, the donkeys, put up before you got here, this feast. We haven't got it finished yet. There's supposed to be rocks put up before it. Let's see, that's that. Now, you saw what a mess the world is in, and you saw the names that they're calling each other. I wouldn't say it, but it was pretty vulgar language that they were using. Tillerson against Trump. I don't know what Trump called him, but it had to be something, along his style. but to call the world's leader, the leader of the United States, a moron, well, what does that say about the rest of them? He's the tops. He was the one that voted in, won the election, got to the top, and yet they call him a moron. All of these people calling him a moron, that he's starting the wars. Well, of course, the wars is being led by the Vatican. That they don't know about. It wouldn't make any difference what Trump did. He might contribute to it, but the true wars that started in and around the great river Euphrates was actually broadcast by Malachi Martin, the top writer of the Catholic Church, when he let the Vatican's plan out to show the depopulation that was going to take place. And he said, at that time, Russia and China, could build up. Russia could become a grizzly, and China, who has always been able to protect its wealth, they have the nuclear bombs, and this is what you see that is lining up for the world to bring about the wicked sinners destroying the sinners. That's what you see in Malachi, the 4th chapter. Sin and sinners destroying all the sinners, bringing them to ashes under the feet of those who reverence Yahweh's name. That's you, that Yahweh has gathered here to the protected place, and that's what he calls it. I wrote a letter here recently. I don't know if it's been run yet or not, but it's a news article. And this NATO chief, the world is at its most dangerous point in a generation. He explains how this generation is getting more dangerous all the time. He uses Iran, but he uses several other nations that are involved in this. You have allies. Russia and Saudi Arabia just signed a big oil contract, and they went by the petrodollar. They didn't use it. This right here is also recorded now, prophesied. Only Yahweh can foretell the future. And he did it back in 96. 96 AY, in the book of Revelations, this was written about, saying, don't hurt this oil and the wine, referring to the lifestyle that was set up by the Vatican. And now that lifestyle is being hacked at. Like the sanctions that's put against Iran, and also North Korea, to try to keep them from being able to buy or sell unless they have this mark of the beast. That's also prophesied in Revelation 13. No one can tell you the future except Yahweh. You got to get this in your heads. Once we teach this to the nations, and we're teaching it now, and it's building up in their minds, as this knowledge is gathering in their mind, we're teaching them that Yahweh only can foretell the future. This is the reason you need to listen to Yahweh. You need to trust in Yahweh because He can guide you away from wars. You'll learn war no more. That's what He says. When I'll establish my house, and this is what it's going to bring. It's going to bring peace. My ways will be taught. His ways have not been taught until this generation, except for a few people. Yeshua taught it, portions of it. The prophets each taught their portion of it. The prophets were inspired to write a portion of Yahweh's way. Yeshua was inspired to prophesy a portion, and each one of the disciples was prophesied to write write his portion of these. The House of Yahweh is the only one that has this whole collection together. Yes, we had to have it. The Vatican had it hidden in the Vatican. Yes, they took it away in 70 AY, the Book of Yahweh. The Book of Yahweh, Isaiah 34:16, it's called the Book of Yahweh. They changed it to the Book of the Lord, but it was the Book of Yahweh that we hold before us here that the House of Yahweh actually brought back in 1987. 1987. Isn't that something? We had to have it. It had to be taught. Search out the Book of Yahweh is a law, is a prophecy and a law. Search out the Book of Yahweh. It will be available in the last days in my house. My ways will be taught. They were written by the prophets and the apostles. We're teaching these here today. It's called the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, which will bring peace, not war. They will learn war no more. We got a new song that you're going to have to learn. I think it's about out where we can start teaching it. I don't see our doctor of music, but he's working on it hard, I know. But war no more. Nation's chief. Now this is the NATO chief. The NATO chief. The NATO is the Pope's army that it's called. NATO chief. World is at its most dangerous point in a generation. The world is more dangerous today than it has been in a generation. The head of the NATO has said days before the mobilization of an estimated 100,000 Russian troops on the EU eastern borders, and as a nuclear crisis grows on the Korean Peninsula. Gene Stoltenberg, Secretary General of the Military Alliance, and the sheer number of converging threats was making the world increasingly perilous. We have proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in North Korea. We have terrorist instability, and we have a more assertive Russia, he said, during a break from the visiting British troops stationed in Estina. It is a more dangerous world, he says. Now, with that in mind, I want you to get this right here. This is Trump says U.S. is committed to mutual support of NATO. So, and he says he's taken the United States to Article 5. And what that says is, Article 5, it says that to all of the allies of the U.S., if Russia or any other nation attacks any of their allies, then all of the United States and everyone else that is tied together with NATO must attack that country and put a stop to it. So they're sworn to this. So once this occurs, once any one of these occurs, the so-called enemies to the United States, they know they've got to hit first. If they don't hit first, they'll be destroyed. And this is what's going on in the minds and in the intelligence of each one of these nations that is not an ally of the United States. The United States has a bunch of allies, but even the United States alone, even with the United States alone, Putin warns Romania, Poland, over implementing U.S. missile shields. The United States has implemented in many nations, not just Poland and Romania, but we have many missile shields located throughout those countries, that fourth part of the earth, because of the danger of nuclear war. Well, of course, Russia is getting set up, and so is China. North Korea has let it be known that when something occurs, they know this, they know that the United States is going to jump in first or try to jump in first. So all of those countries are together, those that are so-called enemies to the United States. So once this takes place, every one of them is saying, we've got to hit first. We've got to get the first tracks in or we're dead. These nuclear bombs, they can wipe out huge cities. They can shut down oil supply. They're worse than tornadoes or hurricanes at shutting down oil supplies. They know where they are. They can also shut down your cell phone. You know, I lived without those for 60-something years, I think. It would be so peaceful and quiet if we just had Yahweh's people here, and and we were all training, eating, working, and training together. But shut down cell phones, automobiles, so forth. They won't shut down the horses. They won't shut down the donkeys either. Romania and Poland are in the potential crosshairs. So by putting this shield in these places, and not just that, there's hundreds of them over there. And Russia knows, and the other nations too, so they've got missiles ready to knock those shields out. And if they're sitting in a big city, they'll probably use a nuclear one to knock out the whole city. But they got thousands and thousands of these nuclear bombs. And even a small portion of them can burn this earth in an hour. 1 hour. That's all it's going to take. Well, that's what he's talking about, the chief of NATO. That's what he's talking about when he says this is going to be most exciting and most dangerous generation. There was someone else that said that. You remember who it was? Y'all remember who it was, don't you? They said this is going to be the most dangerous generation. Matthew 24, Matthew 24, worst time of trouble ever. When you get time, I want you to write down these numbers. He formed me from my mother's womb. That's what Yahweh says about me. The word there comes from number 3335 with 3334. 3334? 33? That was a conception, wasn't it? And 34, that was a birth, wasn't it? Remember that? 3334, which comes from and they give this, Israel was formed as Yahweh's special servant, even from the womb. And they quote This is Strong's now. They quote this. We'll be covering it later, but I would like for you to really study this and get the Strong's, get the others too. Can you hear me? Have you got them written down, those numbers? Number 4 in Strong's Concordance says this. Listen closely. It says, Israel was formed as Yahweh's special servant from the womb. And then he lists Isaiah 44:2, 24, and 49:5. You should be familiar with all those scriptures because it's your job right now. That is your job. That's your job to tell these people all over the world, from the rising of the sun to the setting. That covers it all, right? The sun reaches everyone, right? From the rising to the setting. It's your job. That's what you were called here for. You're called here to work with me to reach the whole world, which we're reaching. We're reaching the whole world with newsletters, with all the technology that Yahweh has made possible. We're on it. We're reaching the world, and we're cutting through all of these lies and criticisms of the enemies, and we're coming out on top. Yahweh is raising us up to the top. Just about every week now, but study those out. And I don't want to go over time today, but let's turn over to Matthew 24 to start this feast, the great Feast of Tabernacles, 10/6/2017. That put it on record right there. Would world war, and soon nuclear war. Now we see this in the prophecies. The prophecy, listen to me, come on. The prophecy of the nuclear bomb that could burn the earth, darken the sun, was prophesied for this generation by the prophets who wrote their portions of the scriptures as a warning to those who want to practice sin. Warning them that you're going to consume yourselves with nuclear fire. That you're going to burn the earth, and the only ones left alive are those that Yahweh says He's going to protect. Which means we're gathering them right now in their minds. And Yahweh even shows us in prophecy when they're going to come to us. And if you pay close attention, I'm going to cover that this feast, Yahweh willing, and I can get the time. In Matthew 24, the Savior talked of this time and said the sun was going to be darkened, and then He gave a generation. And I want you to look at start with verse 37. Matthew 24 and verse 37. But just as the days of Noah were, so will the coming of the Son of Man. The days of Noah, they were all God worshipers. The days of Noah, remember? Abel got wiped out. The house of Yahweh got destroyed. Yahweh let the righteous be taken away. He's not going to do that this time. The righteous are going to live. Yes, and they're going to resurrect those who are dead. All of this is going to come forth from you. Yahweh is the guider, inspiration of it, but you're the ones that's going to be given this power to put those people back in order with a healthy mind and a healthy body, like Adam and Eve, but for 1,000 years without being misled by the gods and Satan. That's your job. That's what you're training for. That's what you're here to train for. The little things of overcoming and being able to tolerate your brothers and sisters, that's another thing. But if you'll put your mind, this is a joyous thing that I'm learning. Start looking forward to it. Start being on time, or even ahead of time. I remember telling my brother one time when we were hunting a place, hunting the two witnesses actually. We found this place where they kept the feast. Well, they were attempting to keep the feast anyway. And we went one time, and it worked out pretty well. We learned a bunch. I got a bunch of notes. Well, the next feast came around, and I told my brother, I said, I'd like to go early, so make arrangements with your job, your boss. I used that word. Make arrangements with your boss because I want to go early. And he said, why do you want to go early? And I said, I want to get those elders where we can talk to them and ask them some questions because I got questions that need answering. And he said, oh, yeah. So anyway, he agreed to go. But I wanted that knowledge. And I said, if we can get there early, we can talk to these elders privately before everyone else starts showing up. Well, of course, we did more witnessing to them than they did to us. And Ted Armstrong, that was one. Herman L. Hay, the Dr. Herman L. Hay, very smart man, but he just was not led by Yahweh. Neither was Ted Armstrong. Neither was Herbert W. And they were the ones that was calling themselves witnesses at that time. Herbert W. and then his son. And after that time, we began to see that they were very weak in the scriptures, very weak in scriptural knowledge. But the fact is, I hungered and thirst. That hunger and thirst in me is what I want to see in you for the Holy Scriptures. Yes, you got questions, you need to write them down. Write them down and let's talk about them. You got criticism. Don't voice it to your children. This is the worst thing you could do to a child. Build up that child like Samuel, like Samuel's mother did him. Build him up. Say that's the place right there. Like you were raising Yeshua himself. Raise him to that point. Brag on the job that he has ahead of him. Never criticize those who are working. Yes, they make mistakes. I know everybody makes mistakes. I kick myself a few times every day. But my heart is there for you. The world is not going to be like you, brethren. And this is a prophecy, and you can rely on this prophecy. The world, those who are God worshipers, those who are fun and game, those who are not putting their time into study. I know you don't know it all. If you read it 10 times, if you read that last book, you're going to be presented again with another one tomorrow. Great Kohan Shaul is going to introduce it. If you read it 20 times, you would never get all of it. You'd be getting new stuff every time you read it. When you go through your studies, you really ought to look at every single word. Formed. Who would ever think of even looking that thing up? And I kept thinking for years that somebody would. And I said, I think I'll just mention it myself and let everyone study it. I've only told about 3 people so far. But now I tell the whole crowd to look up this word. Formed. It has deep meaning in Hebrew. Deep meaning. And it's prophecy. Remember, only Yahweh can prophesy these things. He's the leader of his people. And if you let him work with you, and you stop rebelling, and you put yourself in Samuel's shoes or Yeshua himself, if you could be a Yahshua, if you could be a Yahshua and teach according to the laws, and keep teaching that diligently to your children, when you rise up, when you go to bed, from the time you rise up to the time you go to bed. That's what that sentence means. Teach them all the time you have to teach them. They won't grow tired of it. They'll start loving it. And they'll start looking these things up themselves. I'll guarantee you they will. This is how I was trained myself. I was telling the missionary team, I got taken out of school in the 5th grade. Taken out. We were too poor to buy clothes. Yes, that's a beautiful day of my life. Mother wouldn't let us go to school because she didn't have any clothes for us to wear that looked nice. So she took us out of school. And I cried because I hated that. But Mother kept teaching us at home. And now it just dawned on me the other day, it dawned on me why Yahweh took me out of school. The 5th grade is a dangerous time to be in a public school. The 5th grade, the 6th grade on up. My teacher told me, my 5th grade teacher told me, she said, Bill, I can tell that you're a wonderful boy. And that's all she said. But there was comments like that she knew that I was different from the other children. If I had stayed in school and kept learning and being tempted, I would have fell into a deep trap like all the children in public schools do. They fall into these traps and they get in a rut. Like this was a slang that was made in Oklahoma. When you drive the wagon down the road, the first wagon after a rain, a graded road, it'll make a rut. The second one makes it wider and deeper. The third one, wider and deeper. And pretty soon you can't get out of that rut. It's so deep. Well, that's what takes place when children are in public schools. The 5th grade on is the most dangerous time. And I saw a little of this, and I rejected it, but I went on. I was wanting to study. I was wanting to learn. I wasn't learning the things I wanted because my mind was on the Scriptures. I was learning things that they teach in school that I could have used now, the knowledge and wisdom that they teach, but it's worldly wisdom, but it does help. History helps. Mathematics helps tremendously. All these things help you. Spelling helps. Webster's Dictionary never found that out. They still can't spell. They have to start changing their words every year to get out a new dictionary and say it's spelled this way now. It's not pronounced the anymore, it's the. They have a tough time, a tougher time than I do, and I'm an Okie. I spell it the way it sounds. But the point is that I want you to understand is Yahweh took me out of school to keep me from that mess that went on, that I can see now other people falling into those traps, into those ruts. And they're being led in more ways than one. If you don't watch, your computers will teach it to them. Your telephones will teach it to them. If you don't guide the child all the time away from these traps of Satan, they're traps of Satan that can pull that boy or that girl away from his studies, that will guide him throughout eternity and give him the greatest job in the world. Yes, this is the greatest job ever. There's no way that any of the world can give it to you. Well, Yahweh said, or Yahshua said, get this, please. Matthew 24, read it for yourself. This is a prophecy of Yahshua. But just as the days of Noah were, so will also be the coming of the Son of Man. Genesis 6 shows you that every thought and intent of the person's mind, this is what you find in the schools. This is what you find on television. This is what you find with your computer phones and computers. Only evil continually. Evil continually. The only thing on those computers that is worth watching is the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program being taught by the House of Yahweh. That's the only thing. The rest of it is junk. It's worthless. Well, Yahshua said we're going to be the world. The world is going to be like it was in the days of Noah. Is it not that way now? You just saw it on the news. I didn't make up this news. Watch it for yourself and you'll see what a mess it is. And they're telling you this is a dangerous generation. Yahshua says it is too. He says it's going to be the worst time of trouble ever. Worst time of trouble ever. That's verse 21 and 22 there in your Bible. You should have in your book of Yahweh. You should have that forever etched in your mind right now. This is the worst generation ever for sinners. They're at their peak. Sin is at its peak. They have weapons, their toys that they're playing with now could destroy New York City or any other large city. That's how powerful, how much power these morons, they're calling each other morons, that's the power they have in their hands. And Yahshua himself, who was inspired to write this prophecy right here, this was his portion. This last portion from Matthew clear through to the book of Revelations. We're the only group that has it. All the prophets before us did not have this. And Yahshua wrote this for us. The apostles wrote it for us. So we could use this to train. You can't train in 30 minutes in the scripture. You know, that's not going to help you. Put all the vacant time that Yahweh gives you. Don't make excuses. Put all the vacant time that Yahweh gives you into this study. And Yahweh will raise you up. You don't have to raise yourself up. Yahweh will raise you up. And the glory that you're going to receive very soon, this is very soon now, you're going to be glorified to where the beings in heaven are going to look forward to meeting you and trying to pick your brain. You're going to be given the use of your subconscious mind, so these things you read will be there. The understanding won't be there if you don't get it from me. The understanding will not be in these scriptures unless you get it in the house of Yahweh. You can get a lot of knowledge into your subconscious mind, but the teaching of right and wrong, moral character, taught and practiced and taught. If you imagine this, if I tell you this, Samuel was a very righteous man. His mind was on teaching the words of Yahweh, just like Abraham was. Abraham, the man that didn't walk, he ran. Did you hear that? I told the boys to look that up. Somebody said I should be more pious. You know, I think you're supposed to stand like this, don't you, or something like that. I should be more pious. I said, Abraham wasn't. He looked up and saw 3 Malachim. They weren't angels. They were messengers. One of them was Melchizedek. He looked up and saw them, and he ran. He ran to them. He didn't walk. He even ran out in the pasture and caught a calf. It wasn't his servant that did it. He ran and caught that calf. And he brought it back and gave it to his servant to butcher. No, I don't want to be like Pope Pius. Pope anything. I want to be like Abraham and Eliah, who outrun the chariots. Well, you could do this. I'm not talking about running, but you should be that anxious to get to Yahweh's Word and teach your children. You should be that anxious to get to your books and study. Then you'll find joy in Yahweh. You'll find this joy that I'm trying to teach you, that what you're going to have. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. That's the habitation of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh. That's what that word kingdom means. He's making of you a kingdom of priests and priestess, sons and daughters of Yahweh. That's what Yahweh called you here for, was to train you in that field. So you could take over the universe. You're actually going to form a larger kingdom that will eventually take over every planet in the universe. That's you. First, you're going to be training on this 2 billion people that are being gathered right now. I'm going to try to show you exactly when they will come, because that was one of the questions I had for years. Well, now Yahweh showed me the answer, and that's the job that you have to begin with on those 2 billion people, to train them for this great kingdom of Yahweh, which will bring peace, not war, but peace. They'll learn war no more. No more war. You know, has there ever been a time? Not since the days of Cain. Cain, he's the one that invented the hatred and God worship and taught it to the people. Cush, he was the one that started the great schools. Babylon being the first one. And it quickly spread throughout all the world. Abraham, he didn't make a mistake. Yahweh guided him. But Isaac told his son, don't go down here and marry a worldly woman. Now that should be plain enough for anyone to understand. He says, go to the house of Yahweh. I don't know if David brought that out today, but he will. He did, okay? Don't go there. Go to the house of Yahweh and marry. Well, Abraham, of course, he listened to his wife and gave in to her, and he married Hagar, who, of course, was an Egyptian and come from Ishmael. Ishmael, who was an Egyptian, that's what he became. And of course Yahweh says, okay, and so he sent all of Abraham's children down to Ishmael to be taught. And they learned well God worship and brought it back. No, they didn't bring the laws back of Yahweh. If you will read Moshe's work, it wasn't an easy job. They were stiff-necked and rebellious, but Yahweh gave them a chance, and all that time they were rebellious, he brought his work through his work. He brought his work through Sarah, his blessings through Sarah, like was prophesied by the messengers that Abraham ran out to meet and then ran and caught a calf, and so forth. All of that took place. When they came out of Egypt, they were Coptic Catholics. And they remained Coptic Catholics till they got to the 7 hills of Rome, when they finally started calling themselves Roman Catholics. That's Yada today. Yada. He's lived an evil life. All of his ancestors have. Down to today when the perishing comes. Yes, the perishing, the great perishing, the 1 hour burning. Now you're going to be, if you'll just let me, throughout this feast, listen to everything. Here a while back I was I wasn't governing anything, the speeches, but I noticed Yahweh was. And he was putting these together, and they all fit in like hand and glove. And I said, look, Yahweh's wanting us to line these things up. So let's start lining them up so we'll know who's bringing what. And so it will fit in, and we can bring that's needed in that day. Well, we're just following the pattern of Yahweh. That's what he showed us. And if you look at the gematria of these events, you'll see, as the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins is bringing out and teaching the students, and the students are catching on to this. And this backs up everything that we have done, the gematria does. Be interested in it. Get interested in the book of Yahweh. Get interested in your job, your future job, and train for it. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!